A boy wakes up in a completely dark place and thinks he's inside a nightmare. Confused, he notices a sliver of light appearing in a corner of that tight little room, revealing a forest outside during late afternoon. Then, a status panel appears on the screen and, with a female voice, tells the user that his name is Dragon Egg. Other than that, explanations about status and items will be provided by the skill Divine Voice, level 1, which will also notify him when he levels up. The dragon asks if this is a game, and the voice replies that Divine Voice cannot provide that kind of information at the first level. He asks who he's talking to and where he is, but the system repeats the same answer as before. Nervous, the dragon ends up moving the egg too much and falling from the top of the tree where it was, gaining the skill Fall Resistance. Besides losing HP, the dragon also obtains the title Clumsy. Living up to that title, the poor thing rolls downhill and almost falls into a lake. At the water's edge, he sees his reflection and gets scared when he confirms that he really is an egg. A very valid reason to panic. However, the system corrects him, explaining that he is actually a dragon egg, an F-rank creature that will give birth to a real dragon, but will die if it breaks too early. The egg has no power at all and almost no intelligence because its brain is still developing, and even though it may one day become a feared dragon, an egg is still considered a great gourmet appetizer, and adventurers usually eat one whenever they find it during expeditions, unless the mother is nearby, of course. Confused by all this talk about dragons and adventurers, the egg ends up rolling even further down a slope, raising his rolling level from 1 to 2. Speaking of development, the dragon realizes he's able to minimally control his rolling and, with some practice, starts making a few turns and adjusting his speed better. But he ends up falling from a huge height straight onto the ground, raising Fall Resistance and Clumsy from level 1 to level 2. His HP now drops to just 3 out of 5. And he fears dying like a nobody in this unfamiliar forest. After spending the night sleeping, he notices that his HP recovers with a good nap. Rested, he continues his rolling journey, very aware of how strange it is to be living through this. By the way, he wonders when this egg will hatch someday, and he'll become a real dragon, a terrifying creature, though he has no idea how he'll get there. At most, he imagines he's inside an RPG or something like that, where you need to evolve with experience points and so on, even though fighting enemies as an egg seems extremely difficult. Speaking of enemies, the almost dragon spots a bug in the forest and checks its status. It is a shadow worm, which literally has the title Egg Devourer. Not surprisingly, the monster turns toward the dragon egg and starts chasing him without thinking twice. The egg doesn't hesitate either and gets out of there as fast as he can. Truth be told, even though he worked a lot on his rolling yesterday, he figures he won't escape this one with that alone, so he manages to think of a strategy to defeat the creature, even under enormous pressure. Soon, when he gets near a cliff, the egg makes a maneuver to leave the worm at the edge, and then, managing to get behind it, he pushes the monster off. Even though he falls together with it, the worm's own body cushions the fall and doesn't damage the egg. Suddenly, the shadow worm lifts its body and emits a strange energy, making the egg think this is really the end. However, the insect ends up collapsing and dying for good. With that, the winner earns 12 experience points, and because of his new title, Wandering Egg, he also receives a bonus exp. Realizing that he truly evolves when defeating enemies, the egg concludes that he really is in an RPG. From this moment on, he is a level 5 dragon egg, reaching the maximum level needed for the next evolution phase. Thus, a development tree is shown to him, where 2 transformation options appear. Baby Dragon, Rank D. Little Dragon, Rank D+. The Little Dragon is a dwarf race of dragon, capable of reaching a smaller maximum size than usual, and feared by adventurers because of its fire breath. The Baby Dragon, however, has very tender meat, considered a delicacy delicious when seasoned. This race isn't very good for combat because its fangs are too small, but its advantage is having the potential to grow and become various species of dragons in the future, even though most end up becoming prey for adventurers. After such an unappealing description of the baby dragon, the egg chooses to become a little dragon, since it seems like the safer option. But suddenly, 2 magical hands appear and touch his shell, saying that he should aim for the top and grow strong, because expectations for him are high. The system then warns that Divine Voice has risen to level 2. When the voice disappears, the egg reflects on what he just heard, and even though he felt safer becoming a little dragon, it's true that the baby dragon can evolve well if it survives. With that, his choice is made, and the egg hatches, giving life to his new race, Baby Dragon. From there, the system notifies him about his new level 1 title, Son of the Dragon King, where all resistance skills below level 5 receive a boost. Aside from that, he also gains abilities like Dragon Scale and Baby Breath. Checking his status window, his stats increased considerably, but it seems his HP and MP do not return to maximum after he evolves, which means he needs to sleep anyway to recover. Finally, the dragon thanks the Shadow Worm for providing that pile of experience points, but setting that aside, the little monster begins to feel a huge hunger the moment he lays eyes on the insect. It's true that the worm is grotesque, but the dragon's instincts speak louder, begging for the winged monster to devour its prey and regain strength for the next challenge. Since that's the case, even if he wasn't comfortable with it, the dragon dives into the worm and viciously feeds on his victim. After all, according to him, you can't grow without consuming protein. To be completely honest, the baby dragon slept just as his race claims, like a baby. When he wakes up on the trunk of a tree, for a moment he thinks he's going to look at his paws and see that, in reality, they're his human hands and he has returned to his previous life. However, no such thing. There he is, in this strange new world. The only conclusion that seems obvious to him is that, even though he has no idea how, he ended up reincarnating in another universe, where he lives inside an RPG in the skin of a child dragon. Thinking about it now, the dragon can no longer clearly remember who he was before this. He only has the feeling that he used to be human, as if his memories had been devoured just like the Shadow Worm. Speaking of which, when he looks back, the winged lizard notices the sudden presence of several shadow worms very close to him. And now that he is leveled up, he no longer feels the slightest fear of that type of enemy. On the contrary, he attacks the entire group without hesitation, tearing them apart one by one and accumulating enough experience points to reach level 3 as a baby dragon. With that, he gains access to Baby Breath, a fire ability that greatly increases his combat capability, making his path to more and more experience points much easier. In that same fight, due to the number of enemies defeated, the baby dragon acquires other skills like Dragon Punch, reaching as high as level 15. Then, after finishing off all the worms in the area, his stomach starts rumbling again. Even with all the insects available for him to eat, the dragon thinks about eating something different this time, and then he spots a handful of mushrooms near a tree. However, after eating those fungi, all he gets is an intoxication that makes him throw everything up, which teaches him a valuable lesson. Don't eat random mushrooms without knowing what they are. At least, the clever little guy acquired the skill Poison Resistance, although his clumsy title has now increased to level 3. Next, the baby dragon quickly realizes he won't survive just on insects. So after feeling sick from the mushroom, it's time to look for a new prey, something with more substance. Going deeper into the forest, the dragon comes across a level 6 gray wolf, whose stats are weaker than his. Right away, he thinks it would be a great idea to hunt that wolf. So, showing impressive speed, he positions himself next to the lupine creature and scorches it with fire. In fact, by doing that, he notices he could turn his victims into a nice barbecue, which ends up improving his cooking skills in this wild world. Separating a grilled piece of meat and taking a bite, he concludes that this is exactly what he needed. As time goes by, the baby dragon starts enjoying hunting gray wolves and grilling them, eventually reaching level 20. Since he needs to reach level 25 to evolve again, the baby believes it shouldn't take long, although he notices he's leveling up more and more slowly. At least he's practically becoming a professional grill master from roasting so much meat, which means he's adapting to this new life without too many problems. Even so, it's really annoying to spend the days only listening to the divine voice, which has sort of become his only friend in this strange world, even though, truth be told, she's far from being a friend at this point. Speaking of which, the baby dragon hears distant voices, and although he can't understand a single word, he gets excited upon realizing they are human voices. Without wasting time, hiding behind a tree, he approaches and discovers a trio of humans dressed in tunics and armor, yet another proof that the baby dragon is indeed in a medieval fantasy world. And speaking of that, he needs to remind himself at all times that he is now a dragon, something that could scare people. Still, thinking he's cute enough to show himself without being lynched, the baby checks the trio's status. Levels 11, 14, and 6, respectively. None of them are stronger than the dragon, although their advantage lies in their numbers. Either way, eager to meet new people, the baby dragon officially launches Operation Friendship and uses all his charm to win the adventurers' sympathy. Even so, even without understanding what they were saying, The dragon sees a malicious smile on the lips of the man in front, and with no time to react, he takes a sword slash to the belly that opens a huge wound. The dragon insists he doesn't want to be a threat to humans, but he is struck by an electric spell from the group's mage, leaving his body numb. He gains magic resistance from it, but he's far from intact in this fight. On the contrary, the poor baby is practically already at death's door, hearing the enemy's footsteps approaching. The baby dragon regrets believing humans could become friends with him, and after struggling so much to evolve from an egg to this stage, he sees no way out of the mess he got himself into. Therefore, this is his end. In one last attempt to escape, the baby refuses to die and tries to move his body. But the wound is so severe that it no longer makes sense to try. At that moment, as the warrior prepares for the final blow, the level 6 girl from the trio steps in front of him to stop the attack. The hatchling doesn't know what she's saying, but her body language makes it clear that she's defending him. Then the same woman begins healing the monster with magic, giving him a warm and comforting feeling. For a moment, he thinks she's asking if he's okay, but even though he isn't, that's what her smile suggests. The dragon opens her status window and discovers her name is Myria Melania, a human of Earth. Even though she was almost out of mana points, the girl kept healing him an unbelievable attitude. Because of that healing, the dragon's body was slowly recovering from the paralysis, thinking that she would only leave once he was completely healed. The baby dragon planned to keep pretending he was still in bad shape, even after his body had regenerated, which earned him the title Liar from the Divine Voice. Once again, the hatchling thought he understood what the girl had said, until he obtained the skill Greek language, suggesting that he would understand people better and better as he leveled up this technique. Suddenly, a sinister sound from some creature echoed through the forest, and the two men from the trio, who were farther away, began screaming in despair. Myria ran to help, but the baby dragon grabbed her by the sleeve. Judging by the screams of the two guys who were stronger than she was, the hatchling was certain that the healer would die easily, especially since she had no mana points left. Even so, Myria pulled free from the dragon and kept running to help her companions. Meanwhile, because he hadn't been completely healed, the dragon's body was still partially paralyzed, preventing him from moving. Desperate, he forced his body to get up and, driven by the desire to help that girl, he broke through the paralysis and ran after her. Soon, when he reached the source of the noise, he found himself facing a C-rank stone hatchling, with an absurd HP of 197. Around the giant creature, Myria and the others were lying on the ground, apparently unconscious. Finally, the stone monster turned toward the baby dragon and attacked. By a hair, the baby escapes death with a jump, and, after hiding in the bushes, he thinks about how stupid he was for believing he could win by working with humans. By the way, he also questions in what way that guy is supposed to be a dwarf, because the thing is huge. Then he sees Myria fallen on the ground and realizes that, although she is alive, the enemy is going after her. So, determined to keep her from being killed for good, the baby runs toward her, but he is interrupted halfway by intrusive thoughts telling him to run away. Suddenly, the divine voice grabs hold of his body, making him admit to himself that he really does not have the necessary skills to defeat a creature of that size. But he refuses to simply abandon someone who saved him not long ago. With that, the baby moves toward the opponent and, when attacked by its tail, he rolls and earns the title King of Evasion, and even manages to hit the enemy's head using that same move. When he lands on the ground, he notices that the mage of the group has kicked the bucket, but the warrior is still alive. Keeping in mind that he could still save these people, the baby continues using his rolling technique to deal with the enemy, having developed great mastery over this skill after spending time as an egg. However, of course, his idea is not to defeat this monster, but to lure it away so he can later return and rescue the people. Even so, the stone dragon stomps the ground and lifts a huge amount of dirt, striking the baby directly, who is shocked that this thing even has an area attack. For that reason, knowing that dodging isn't very effective, the baby jumps toward the enemy and throws a fire punch. However, the enemy regenerates and makes even clearer that it cannot be defeated. Still, the little guy sees this as his chance to put Myria over his shoulder and escape. At that moment, he looks at the man who is still alive, but knowing he has no time to save both, he at least could take the girl away. While carrying Myria to a safe place, the dragon realizes she is losing HP because she is bleeding, so, in a desperate attempt, he tries to cast a healing spell, but realizing he must act instead of relying on a fantasy in his head, He uses his sharp sense of smell to find out from which direction Myria came, in hopes of finding a safe place. After identifying the human's scent, he runs that way with great effort and needs to double his speed when he is attacked by a pack of gray wolves that, by insisting on the chase, manage to surround the dragon. With no escape, the monster defends himself. A few minutes later, Myria slowly opens her eyes and sees the baby dragon standing against several wolves at the same time, fighting bravely against all of them to protect the human. But she soon closes her eyes again and blacks out, after winning the fight with enormous effort, already at night. The baby dragon continues escaping with Myria on his shoulders. However, he begins to reach his physical limit. Luckily, just as he is about to collapse, the dragon finds a human village and cries out for help. Unfortunately, the humans do not understand what he is saying. They only hear the horrible growls of the creature he truly is. So the men who hear the sound run outside armed with work tools to protect themselves. One of them even drives a spear into the dragon's leg, and the poor creature can do nothing but hold Myria on his shoulder and beg for help. Fortunately, one of the men recognizes that the person being held by the creature is Myria, which calms down the others. After insisting many times and realizing he won't get anything across by speaking, the dragon lays the woman on the ground and runs away. The men quickly rush to check on Myria and, seeing her condition is serious, they call for Marielle. Meanwhile, alone in the forest, the baby at least feels relieved that the girl is safe, even though he cannot say the same about his thigh, since the wound left by the spear is terrible. At that moment, he learns that no matter what a dragon does, he is still a dragon. As a consolation prize, the divine voice gives him the title Little Hero. At sunrise, in the village where she was taken, Myria wakes up after a long rest and finds Marielle by her side. The elf had to bring her there to treat her, since the situation was bad enough that she had to use white magic at a level she hadn't used in a long time. Not to mention, Myria slept for 2 full days, which shows just how severe her injuries were. As Myria tries to understand who brought her to the village, Marielle grumbles that, as she had always said, the human shouldn't have let Daz influence her like that. Speaking of which, Myria asks if her companions are alright, and her friend says that Grants is dead. His body was found in the forest, and, from what was said, something very heavy fell on top of him. She also comments that she never imagined Daz would try fighting a stone dragon again, which was a huge stupidity, thinking about it now. Either way, the men didn't find his body, but judging by the situation, he was probably devoured. Believing she is the only one who survived, Myria can't hold back her tears and blames herself for not convincing Daz to turn back before it happened. For her part, despite everything, Marielle is satisfied with the girl's survival, especially because she knows how much Daz isn't the type to listen to others. Even so, Myria doesn't think he is a bad person. If there is something she admires about that man, it is the fact that he is always the first to face the monsters that approach the village. And that was one of the reasons he was such a big influence on the kids. However, something was different on the day they went into the forest. Myria had seen Daz arguing with a man in the tavern just because he said Daz wasn't capable of defeating a stone dragon, since he had run from one last time. Annoyed, the adventurer argued that that was 10 years ago, and today he certainly was capable of taking that monster down. Obsessed with this, the man went after Grants and Myria to join him on a dragon hunt. According to him, Marielle allowed this expedition, although Myria reminded him that the elf had already made it very clear that she should not accompany this guy if he tried to face the stone dragon. However, Daz used emotional blackmail, saying that he and Grants would go after the monster anyway, and that, if the woman didn't go with them, the two of them would possibly be killed. Concerned for her friends, Myria agreed to go with them, as long as Daz promised they would leave if things became too dangerous. Regretting what happened, Marielle states that Daz died because of his huge ego. On the other hand, she celebrates the fact that Myria managed to reach the village despite her severe injuries. Since she brought it up, Myria asks if someone carried her back, and the elf simply says that she was attacked by a monster outside the village. Confused, Myria only remembers that she lost consciousness when she was attacked by the stone dragon, and only woke up now, so it would be impossible for her to have returned on her own. But Marielle insists that this is the only way, since no villager went into the forest that night except for the expedition trio. In fact, as far as the elf knows, Myria was found unconscious at the entrance of the village and was about to be attacked by a monster, but Gregory scared the creature away. Faced with these facts, Marielle believes her friend lost her memory after the intense trauma she suffered. Trying hard to remember what happened, a brief memory of the baby dragon fighting wolves appears in the human's mind, so she asks what the monster that attacked her looked like. But the elf has no idea, since it had already disappeared when she arrived at the scene. Speaking of him, the little hero wakes up and is surprised to have recovered all of his health, something he did not expect considering the severity of his injury. In the end, this seems to be an advantage of being a dragon, since a human would never have the same regeneration. Worried about Myria, the dragon wonders how she is doing. Although he saved the girl, the baby knows he could have easily been killed by that giant creature, because even though he became stronger after evolving, he still couldn't compete with that thing. Everything could have been different if he were more powerful. Therefore, the baby dragon is shaken by a strong desire to become stronger. Driven by his determination, the baby dragon uses a very clever strategy to lure several shadow worms into one place to farm exp. In this case, he hung one worm on a tree, forcing the creature to use its Call Allies skill, thereby controlling the exact spot where reinforcements would appear, what could be called the perfect trap. Because of his idea, the baby dragon was rewarded by the divine voice with the title Path of Evil, which he honestly did not like very much. Regardless, the little guy couldn't waste the opportunity he created, so he went straight for the monsters. Despite admiring their loyalty for coming to help a friend, the baby dragon roasted all of them and leveled up to 25, meeting the requirements for his next evolution. Excited, he is presented with his possible options: Mini Dragon, Mini Angel Dragon, Child Dragon, Marble Child Dragon, Plague Young Dragon. Confused, the first thing the baby notices is that the last one seems quite sinister. Now he has a few questions. What on earth is the difference between mini and child, or between baby and little dragon? Fortunately, the divine voice appears to explain that being a little dragon does not mean you are small, but rather that you will not grow beyond your current size. Little dragons level up quickly, but are inferior to babies in terms of abilities and development potential. In short, the little dragon is the short path. It starts strong, though not too strong. On the other hand, the baby dragon is the longer path, starting weaker, but capable of becoming more powerful over time. The divine voice adds that the child type is an improved version of the baby. The mini type does not have many evolution options, but the ones it does have are guaranteed to be good. Finally, the dragon asks what the young type means, but the divine voice simply stays silent. Breaking his head over what to choose, the baby dragon asks for a quick explanation of each of the 5 options. So, the divine voice begins again. The mini dragon is small, like the little dragon, but has slow growth and few evolution paths. In exchange, it can evolve further if it shows potential. The baby thinks this option is terrible because of its slow growth and few future paths, so he discards it immediately. As for the mini angel dragon, known as the helper spirit, this dragon devotes its life to helping others. But although it is good with white magic, it is not effective in combat. Assessing this option, the baby doesn't like the idea of being weak in battle, but he remembers how much he wanted healing magic like Myria. Next, the child dragon is the natural evolution of the baby dragon, which, as it grows, strengthens its physical abilities, something that greatly appeals to the baby, as it is a recommended path for his current class. Moving on to the marble child dragon, these dragons have undergone a mutation and have a drop-shaped pattern on their skin. They possess more magical power than most other dragons. The baby considers this option, thinking it would be good to have strong magic in the long run, and the mutation sounds like something special. Lastly, the plague young dragon, the first step toward becoming an evil dragon that spreads disaster wherever it goes. Although they are known for dying young, they are extremely intelligent and can take on human form, even if they live solitary lives. At the end of the explanation, the baby dragon was covering his ears since he no longer considered this option due to its horrible traits. But he ended up hearing the part about being able to take on a human form, which could be his big chance to enter villages and try to live a normal life without being stabbed in the thigh by a spear. From that point on, he weighs everything and is left with a cruel dilemma, since, as we all know, this class has plague in its name for a reason, just as the divine voice said. On one hand, the lizard knows this seems like a terrible idea, but he also worries a lot about Myria, and he wants the ability to transform into a human so much so he can live a pure and honest life alongside his friends. And if everything goes wrong, he can simply return to normal. With that in mind, the baby dragon decides, once and for all, to become a young plague dragon. After transforming and looking at his reflection in the water, the poor thing begins to regret it, because he truly looks like an evil being. Then he learns from the divine voice that his status check ability has leveled up. So now he can analyze the details of each technique he has. Besides that, the divine voice itself has reached level 2, and the young plague dragon has gained the skills Flight and Dragon Scale Dust. His bite ability evolved into poisonous fangs, and he also received several other powers that give the dragon a headache. Lastly, he receives the title Calamity, and the villain title has risen to level 2. Starting to become genuinely worried about the class he chose, the dragon checks his abilities and cannot find human transformation anywhere, which was the one thing he wanted most. Desperate, he demands explanations from the divine voice, but it cannot provide that type of information at his current level. After lying down for a while to reflect on everything that's happening, the young plague dragon collects his thoughts for a moment and tries to figure out other important things, such as who the divine voice even is. Again, it says it cannot give information about that. So the dragon turns his attention to Dragon Scale Dust. The divine voice explains that when the dragon flaps his wings, he can spread a weakening miasma that affects everything around him. At the maximum level, he can poison entire nations simply by flying over them. Hearing that, the young dragon flaps his wings and immediately kills a flower, making him realize he is basically a walking biological weapon. Next, he asks for an explanation about his pestilent breath ability, which is basically blowing an infected breath in the enemy's face. Besides causing serious debuffs, it is extremely contagious, so much so that it once exterminated an entire civilization. More and more worried that he might be the villain of this story, the reincarnated boy asks if the titles he received are at least something other than evil. The voice explains the first one, Mini Hero, granted to those who have shown modest courage and whose kindness might one day lead them to a more advanced heroic status. This title provides a slight increase in the damage of certain weapons, as well as having a deep impact on the dragon's evolutionary path, thinking he might escape the evil path if he keeps leveling that title. The young plague dragon asks about the villain title. The divine voice explains that it is meant for diabolical villains who leave mountains of bodies behind, laughing wickedly as they count how many people they have killed in their lives. This title grants a small increase to dark-type powers, makes learning white magic more difficult over time, and reduces regeneration rate, also being highly influential in the dragon's evolutionary path. Terrified once again, the young plague dragon thrashes on the ground, certain that he made the worst possible choice. Meanwhile, Myria and Mariel check the protection stones spread throughout the village, since they create a barrier around the territory and must be working perfectly. In reality, this barrier is a charm spell that subconsciously discourages creatures from passing through it, but it is ineffective against monsters with strong determination or a very clear goal in mind, making Myria wonder if, in the end, that little creature really was trying to protect her. Either way, since that thing managed to get past the barrier, Mariel needs to make sure it never happens again. So the two head to the next protection stone for the elf to cast a spell on it. At that moment, Myria admits she has a strong feeling that she was saved by that little dragon in the forest. The elf asks if the human is developing feelings for a monster, and Myria quickly explains that she is not. The friend then explains that monsters evolve into different forms and become stronger as this happens, and that they can level up by hunting other creatures. Different types have different maximum levels, and once a monster reaches this peak, it evolves a rank, then repeats the process until it becomes more and more powerful. Myria finds it hard to believe that people in the past discovered the nature of monsters, but Mariel doesn't understand what the woman means, since she herself already told Myria these things 11 years ago. The issue, according to the human, is that she was only 5 years old at the time and so short that she had to look up to face the elf. Feeling like she was called short, Mariel looks at Myria with a face that says she could easily commit several misdeeds against her. Setting that aside, she explains that special people appear from time to time, capable of hearing the divine voice and sharing information about monsters, levels, and everything else. For example, there are saints and heroes responsible for humanity, knowing everything it knows about this subject. In any case, in summary, every creature seeks only power, which makes them increasingly ferocious and dangerous. If that dragon really saved Myria, the elf is certain that one day those fangs will turn against the human, because monsters are nothing more than reflections of their own instincts, and it is not wise to place human expectations on a being that is nothing more than that. In the end, coexistence between monsters and humans is simply incompatible. Speaking of him, the young plague dragon doesn't give up after realizing he is on the path to becoming the villain of the story. On the contrary, he promises himself he will evolve very quickly so he can return to the right path. Just like in Ice Sky stories, he wants to be the hero, not the demon king. Above all, he needs to learn human transformation so he can go to Myria's village. Finally, the dragon begins his journey in search of XP to level up and get out of this situation as soon as possible. But the bad phase keeps following him. After all, the poor guy is suddenly tangled in a web while calmly walking through the forest. And if the web was strong enough to hold a dragon, it's only fair that the one responsible for it is just as strong. In this case, a giant spider shows up to wrap up her dinner with her D-rank strength. Besides being trapped, the dragon assumes he's not capable of defeating an enemy with that kind of power. But when he receives another burst of web, he needs to act quickly. So he responds with a baby breath, burning the spider's backside that was pointed right at him. However, the web surrounding him also starts catching fire, forcing him to roll on the ground to extinguish it, which at least grants the lizard the fire resistance skill. To improve the situation, the spider is now under the burning status, leaving her vulnerable to a physical attack from the dragon. Soon, the winged monster strikes his opponent with paralytic venom claws, but the arachnid's HP is still at half, which convinces the dragon that killing this creature really isn't going to happen. So he takes advantage of her paralysis and gets out of there as fast as possible. But as if that weren't enough, the spider already breaks free from the paralysis and starts chasing the runaway at full speed. Luckily, the young plague dragon remembers he gained the fly skill, so he jumps and flaps his wings with all his strength to take off once and for all. Even so, for some reason he still can't actually fly and is forced to return to the ground and keep rolling away. 10 minutes later, the chase is still going on, and the dragon has already given up on the idea that the spider might run out of energy. Fortunately, he levels up his roll skill to level 3, which increases his escape speed and grants him the title Chicken Run. Even annoyed with this cowardly title, the lizard can't think about it for long, because he's heading straight toward a cliff. At high speed, there's no time to stop, and he just confirmed that his flying ability isn't reliable. One way or another, the only option is to roll as fast as possible and jump, hoping to reach the other side. He does it, and upon reaching the sky with good momentum, the young plague dragon spreads his wings and manages to glide to the other side of the cliff. Thinking he escaped the threat, he looks back and notices a small detail. The spider is weaving a web to cross the abyss. Without delay, she leaps in front of him and resumes the chase in the same way. At least, as some consolation, the dragon leveled up his rolling to level 4. Along the path, a distracted gray wolf appears and is run over, granting 20 experience points to the young plague dragon. Because of the walking egg title, he receives a bonus of 12 points, leveling up from 1 straight to 3, and the wolf wasn't the only victim of the lizard's rolling. Whatever appeared in front of him kept getting smashed, raising him to level 8 enough to maybe confront the creature he's been running from. Taking the risk, the young plague dragon turns toward the spider and checks his skills. Among them was one called Double Venom, which he has no idea what it does. Either way, the strategy is to get close enough to unleash a full power baby breath. However, the spider suddenly releases a smoke with 2 different colors, which is probably the double venom. The dragon is able to move thanks to his resistance, but he must stay alert not to expose himself to the substances for too long. The spider is clearly waiting for him to faint so she can strike. But since she doesn't know he has resistance, he thinks of a counter strategy, pretending to be dead so the enemy approaches. After acting his heart out, the young plague dragon would feel like an idiot if it didn't work. But the opponent falls for the trick and gets close enough to take a baby breath. With her body in flames, she takes a tail strike that ends the fight for good. With this victory, the young plague dragon evolves to level 14, which to him is a huge upgrade. Also, his baby breath skill has gone up to level 3, and he gains the dragon tail skill for having used his tail in the fight. Even so, the dragon is anxious to finally receive his ability to transform into a human. However, the divine voice ends the announcements and leaves the poor guy hanging. Frustrated, the little flying lizard picks up the wolf he ran over and goes off in search of a shelter for the night. At some point on his walk, he finds a cave and shouts to check whether someone is inside, but no one answers. So he uses the hole as a home for today and lights a fire to roast the meat. Although he loves grilled meat, the dragon complains that the smell is still awful. So he gets the idea of squeezing onto it the fruits he found earlier, since they have a good pepper-like scent. After doing that, the experience definitely improves 100%. And the dragon is sure he's found a way to take his meals to another level. By the way, since this cave is up for grabs, the young monster doesn't want to give anyone the chance to steal the place. So he decides to use it as a base while he looks for more of those red fruits. On the other hand, the cave is too wet and sticky to preserve the fruit, so it would be better to dry them outside. From that thought alone, the dragon receives the title Master Chef, which makes him feel like he's on Big Brother, with how much his private life is observed at every step. Finally, after filling his belly with meat, the mini-hero thinks it would be amazing to become popular in that village thanks to his cooking. But he quickly remembers that the sharp claws he has aren't exactly the kind of thing a human wants to see. Before anything else, he cannot mingle with those people while being a dragon. That is, at least he was cuter when he was a baby dragon. But now he has large, pointed fangs, as well as those eyes that exude wickedness, which even makes him think that not even that girl would be able to recognize him now. Desperate, the young plague dragon begs the heavens to grant him human transformation, because up to this moment he is stuck in the role of humanity's villain. However, his prayers are not answered. Meanwhile, in a tavern in the village, Myria finds out that Dawes was seen by Mr. Burt's at a nearby pond while he was fishing. Out of nowhere, at a certain moment during the fishing, Dawes simply walked past him and, mumbling something, went into the bushes. Upon hearing this story, Mr. Burt's friends think he is making it up, since he drinks every day. Although the fisherman insists that he did not see things, everything was very clear to him. Seeing that the woman is acting strangely, one of the men sitting at the table asks Myria not to blame herself for what happened, but she says it's fine and leaves without further explanation. Without wasting time, she tells Marielle that she is going into the forest after Dawes, but the elf puts her foot down because of the danger involved. Besides, if Dawes were really alive, he would already have returned to the village. Even so, Myria suggests that a search party be formed to go after the man, but the elder does not want to put anyone's life at risk. On the other hand, since her friend is obviously desperate, the elf promises to ask the Adventurers Guild to investigate the case. The next day, after having eaten and slept well, the young plague dragon feels ready to evolve a lot, until he finally obtains his ability to transform into a human. After washing his face in a lake, he sees something strange at the water's edge, as if it were a slime or something like that. However, when he looks at the creature's status, the dragon's head begins to throb with so much pain. At the same time, the status view skill rises from level 3 to level 4, even though the dragon cannot see the attributes of that gelatinous monster. Before he noticed it, the lizard was attacked by fragments of slime that had separated from the main body to chase after their target. Obviously, the young plague dragon ran off without thinking twice and ended up hiding behind a tree. After catching his breath, he remembered that he had managed to roughly analyze that thing's status, and it didn't seem like anything special. But either way, he decided to drop the whole mess and get away from the trouble, so he could continue along another path. With that in mind, the dragon wandered through a part of the forest and came face to face with a stray jar that sparked his curiosity. Maybe it was filled with fruit or something else worth eating. However, instead of that, the jar itself revealed it was actually a monster. The Tartajar, which if you didn't catch it from the name is a jar that resembles a turtle. Unsure whether he was looking at a jar or a turtle, the flying lizard charged in with a dragon punch. But the blow only took a measly 1 HP from the opponent, which felt humiliating from the attacker's perspective. Since things were going that way, he raised the bar and started hitting the jar in every way he could think of. But the creature used its sleep ability to keep recovering its HP, basically protecting itself with its shell while regenerating during the fight. Tired of the nonsense, the young plague dragon grabbed the supposed turtle to see if it really knew how to swim, then tossed the creature off the cliff that ended in a river. With that, he earned 36 experience points and, because of his walking egg title, got a few extra points as well, leveling up from 14 to 15. On top of that, he gained the title Rogue King, and his Malefactor title leveled up from 2 to 3. However, aside from these last gains, another situation didn't look promising at all. A whole legion of Tartajars appeared to help their friend who, upon being thrown off the cliff, had used its Call Allies skill which, unsurprisingly, called its allies. To raise the stakes, the army of walking jars merged into one, forming the Tartajar Megazord, which was literally one climbing on top of another their choice, becoming a mountain of jars or turtles. The young plague dragon, for his part, didn't acknowledge them at all. He simply grabbed the first jar at the base of the stack and threw it at the vertical line of enemies, shattering all of them at once. With that, he acquired the meteorite skill. He also earned 594 experience points, not counting the walking egg bonus, and that took him straight from level 15 to 30. This also raised his flight skill from 1 to 2, and status vision from 4 to 5. Without a doubt, the dragon realized that defeating an entire group of Tartajars had been the best thing he could have done. Speaking of which, he checked the jars those creatures used as shells and noted that they didn't seem to be made of material as sturdy as you'd expect. Setting that aside, the important part was that he now had enough meat to eat until he felt sick. But speaking of feeling sick, he thought it would be good to have a little salad to balance his diet. And lastly, since the topic was balance, what was really leaving the poor guy shaken was the fact that he still hadn't unlocked his long-dreamed-of ability to transform into a human. And it was even more frustrating knowing he had leveled up 10 times and that damn skill still hadn't shown up. Suddenly, while walking through the forest, the young plague dragon saw the sky glowing with an intense purple light, along with the sound of footsteps among the trees. Cautious, he advanced quietly, searching for the source of the noise, and eventually found some kind of bear wandering through the woods. On the other hand, there was something strange about that animal, especially the way it walked. Since it was too far away, he couldn't see its status, but he could at least check its species. It was a mud bear, meaning a Barurso, a D+ rank monster. Even though the level wasn't that high, he couldn't afford to underestimate it, especially because it had good recovery skills. Since it was the same level as the young plague dragon, he wondered whether he could take it head-on. But what caught his attention most was the fact that the creature was made of mud. Maybe, after defeating the bear, he could mold the mud using fire and build a custom jar to serve as furniture for his shack. With that idea in mind, the winged lizard took advantage of the mud bear being distracted and approached quietly, climbing onto a strategic tree trunk that offered the best angle for an attack. Once ready, the dragon leapt in and was already smiling at the easy victory, but was caught off guard when the bear simply opened its belly, revealing an interior full of mud spikes, as if its torso were an Iron Maiden, that medieval torture device. Afraid of being lovingly embraced by that paradise of spikes, the dragon relied on agility, using his roll skill, which gave him the mobility he needed to avoid becoming paste inside the beast's artificial stomach. With a sequence of rolls no comment, the dragon managed to take 15 of the bear's 40 GP. But as the divine voice had made clear, this creature had excellent restoration abilities, and of course it used that skill to return its health to full. Seeing the situation, the dragon rolled around the mud bear while thinking of a way to finish it off. At his current level, defeating this opponent in a single blow was out of the question. The strongest thing he had learned so far seemed to be meteorite, but obviously he couldn't grab a monster this big and toss it like he had done with the Tartajar. So for now, the strategy would be roll, hit, and run. Roll, hit, and run, repeating the process while the mud bear lost mana. However, tired of being rolled on, the mud bear surprised him by unleashing a sandstorm which, once it ended, left the bear transformed into an even sturdier and spikier version of itself, preventing the dragon from continuing to attack with his roll. On the other hand, the mud bear has only 19 mana points left out of a total of 100, which shows that it's at its limit. Even so, the enemy can still put up a fight, enough to tear off one of its own spikes and throw it at the target, who dodges by reflex at the very last moment. Analyzing the material the opponent's body is made of more carefully, the young plague dragon counterattacks and, taking advantage of his speed, quickly closes the distance and rips off one of the mud bear's arms. After all, it seems that the clay softens when it's far from the bear's body. Not only that, the dragon is smart enough to shape the arm into a sphere that can be used in his meteorite skill. Said and done, the young plague dragon delivers a powerful strike that melts the mud bear's entire upper half, finishing the fight and granting a total of 150 XP, which was doubled because of the title walking egg. Right away, the dragon goes from level 30 to 33, in addition to earning the title Nutcracker, certainly because of the way meteorite works. By the way, just as he had thought from the start, the lizard really did use the bear's clay to improve the decoration of his humble home, which even gained a clay oven as a bonus. After lighting firewood inside it, the dragon decides to get some food while the furnace heats up. In the middle of the woods, he finds a lightning mushroom which, according to the divine voice, sucks all the nutrition from the tree it grows on and, because of that, is unable to produce fruit. On the other hand, this leech-like trait makes it extremely nutritious and delicious, even though it has a paralyzing poison. Since he has no resistance to that, The dragon throws the mushroom away and moves on to the next possible food source, but gets distracted and doesn't notice that one of the flowers on the path was actually a carnivorous plant. Even so, the lizard was fast enough to react and cut the plant in half, eliminating the danger on the spot. According to the Divine Voice's assessment, that creature is capable of eating animals, but it's unable to digest salt, and because of that, the salt accumulates in the white part of its root. Incidentally, since salt is indispensable for cooking, the dragon already knows what to do with the extra root. Meanwhile, at the village gate, Myria thinks sadly about the things Marielle told her. But even though the elf told her not to leave on this mission, the human doesn't want to waste time and lose the chance of finding Daz alive. After all, according to Mr. Burtz's story, Daz was walking through the forest in a strange way. She doesn't know whether it's true or not, but the report was enough to make the sorceress hit the road. Say whatever you want about Daz, but the woman cares about him, and she still blames herself for not stopping him from leaving on that mission that ended the way it did. On the way, Myria is attacked by a shadow worm, but she destroys the monster with a fireball. After finishing the fight calmly, she reflects that everything will be fine as long as she stays calm. Returning to the dragon's expedition to find new snacks, he comes across the shrew monster, a creature capable of moving at higher levels and attacking people, and its flavor, which resembles meat, makes it a highly desired delicacy. Happy to have found something decent to eat, the dragon then encounters another strange mushroom, this time called Moro Troja, which, unlike the others that were at best level C in value, has an A-level value. This mushroom is so valuable that it can restore an entire nation's economy if well cultivated. As if that weren't enough, it's a hallucinogen that causes intense euphoria, meaning only positive traits. 500 years ago, people discovered that they could mix this mushroom with certain stimulants, which ended up creating a massive number of drug addicts in that society. Upon hearing that last part, the dragon doesn't think twice before setting fire to the entire cluster of Moro Troja, raising his mini-hero title from level 1 to 2. Meanwhile, Myria hid from a wolf pack running toward the direction she was walking, allowing her to continue her path once they passed. At that moment, the young plague dragon finds a fruit called Piperus, valued at beep, with a unique aroma that stimulates appetite and was, for a time, considered the most popular seasoning. Long ago, the demand for such high-quality spices was so great that this fruit was worth gold. The lizard takes some home to try the spice out. Speaking of home, Myria is getting farther and farther from hers and, as a result, is wandering deeper into the forest. She knows that as she goes deeper, the dangers she may encounter will get worse, so she decides to take another look at the areas closer to the village and then return home. When the dragon returns to his shack, he manages to use the lightning mushroom as a source of electricity to light the cave. Besides that, the oven had already heated enough to harden the clay he had shaped into cooking pots. Without wasting a second, he begins preparing dinner with the delicious ingredients he collected in the woods, resulting in a magnificent dish brought to life by the salt and seasoning. After devouring a portion of the meal, the dragon levels his Master Chef title to level 2, and also gains the Artisan title for his ceramic work. Feeling no nostalgia for his former life, he gets excited thinking about what he'll build next for his home or what he'll cook for tomorrow's lunch. The next day, during a carriage ride, a beastwoman hears that they've arrived at the forest, so she wakes Miss Melcia from her sleep. When they step off the vehicle, she has no doubt that this is the place the guild sent them to investigate, Noah Forest. Some time later, the dragon returns from another hunt and, besides separating the pelts of the wolves he hunted, uses part of the collected meat to prepare lunch and leaves the rest to dry outside the cave. However, before long, some monkeys steal the meat hanging from the trees to eat it, which makes the dragon furious. He definitely needs to do something to stop anyone from stealing his food. So he begins preparing a poisonous potion with several suspicious mushrooms and soaks the meat that will serve as bait for the monkeys. By the way, the mini-hero has started to tell which plants are poisonous and which are not, now without the help of the Divine Voice. Setting aside the poisoning of the monkeys for a moment, he finds a beautiful flower field whose soil grows the perfect flowers to decorate his little house flowers that, with their unmatched beauty, could serve as a remedy for the pains of the world. Suddenly, in the middle of his poetic thoughts about flowers, the mini-hero sees a creature sprout from beneath the blossoms, something he had never seen before. According to the status panel, it was Leserda, the poison princess, owner of an endless amount of extremely poisonous abilities. The dragon becomes afraid to get close to the monster, and for good reason. Lacerda bites the dragon's shoulder and injects a dose that increases his poison resistance from level 3 to level 4. But the substance is so strong that it makes the lizard fall to the ground and lose part of his movement. After checking the system to understand what had hit him, the dragon reads that it was a type of special poison, but the divine voice couldn't provide any further information about it at his current level. Not knowing what to do, the protagonist decides to inspect the caterpillar's information to see if he can learn anything. Then the divine voice reveals that the poison princess Lacerda is rank D and is a sneaky creature that poisons its prey and flees, later returning to feed on the victim. The princess's bodily fluid can become an antidote to her own poison, and Lacerda uses this to bargain over whether the victim will live or die, at the very least able to move thanks to his high poison resistance. The dragon plans to capture Lacerda while she waits nearby for him to die. Soon, seeing that she is being chased, the caterpillar starts running in the same style. The dragon usually uses rolling, turning it into a high-speed chase toward the cliff the dragon knows lies ahead, since he himself came across it when running from that spider. In the middle of this, the mini-hero evolves rolling from level 4 to 5, which gives him enough confidence to increase his speed. But suddenly, he is hit by a mud weapon that Lacerda manages to fire while rolling, something that seems absurd to him. From that point on, when he returns to the chase, the young plague dragon has to deal with a barrage of mud shots coming at him. Even so, if there is one thing the mini-hero knows how to do, it is roll. And with this skill he manages to maneuver around the projectiles and collide with the poison princess Lacerda, who ends up falling toward the cliff, since he absolutely cannot lose his antidote. The dragon jumps to grab the caterpillar in midair. The poison damages his body, making his movements and reflexes difficult. But with enough effort he not only manages to capture the poison princess, he also promises that he will save her despite everything she did. After saying that, the malefactor uses his baby breath downward to propel himself upward, returning to solid ground. On the other hand, what is not solid at all is the amount of poison inside his body, and no wonder the poor guy is practically dying. As if that weren't enough, the young flying lizard still says that what matters is that Lacerda is fine, and she only shows him the tip of her tail in response. Hours later, returning to the forest once again in search of her companion, Myria Melania still finds no clue. At the same time, Marielle calls out her friend's name to find out where she went, and upon hearing her voice, the human girl steps out of the woods to see what's going on. The elf explains that she was worried about Myria and went to her house, but she wasn't there. So now she wants to know what the girl was up to. Myria answers that she was in bed after feeling a bit sick with a cold, but decided to take a walk as soon as she felt better. Marielle directly asks if she hasn't been going into the forest, and she promptly denies it. Although suspicious, Marielle says she believes her friend and informs her that the guild's adventurers are already arriving in the village, so Myria doesn't need to worry. With that said, the elf asks for a little help with her shopping, and the human follows right behind, afraid her lie might be discovered. Back to the young plague dragon, he wakes up startled and tries to run through all the details of what happened to him so far. Remembering that he was poisoned, he sees Lacerda right in front of him and thinks she was simply waiting for him to die from the poison. But soon notices that his arms are no longer heavy, so he asks if the caterpillar gave him the antidote. She nods, and the dragon picks her up with his claws and emphasizes how the two of them went through an intense battle of blood, sweat, and tears, which probably made the little one realize they are soulmates. In fact, now that he's looking at her more closely, the mini-hero even finds her kind of cute. When night comes, he prepares a meal for his new cave companion, and by the way she is eating, she seems to like it a lot. Taking advantage of the moment, the dragon realizes that neither of them actually has a name, since young plague dragon and poison princess Lacerda are just the names of their species. Still, he concludes that they don't need names and decides to keep calling the caterpillar you. Hearing that, the caterpillar approaches and snuggles against the dragon's face, and he notices how attached she already seems to him. Because of that, he allows her to stay in the cave as long as she wants. Meanwhile, Lacerda sees a jar full of poison created by the cave's owner and immediately starts eating it as if it were a meal. The mini-hero panics, but soon assumes that by eating something poisonous, she strengthens her own venom. Speaking of which, the big guy becomes curious about the taste, since the little one is devouring it so happily. So he dips his finger into the jar and puts the poison in his mouth, which immediately causes severe side effects throughout his body. though as a reward, his poison resistance increases from level 4 to 5. The next morning, a wolf pack attacks the young plague dragon and his newest companion. Lacerda fires her mud weapon and knocks down some of the wolves, while her partner handles the rest with kicks and punches. With the mission successful, the impression left is that they make a good pair. Afterwards, the two work together to gather some coconuts and enjoy an afternoon snack, further strengthening their bond. At nightfall, the dragon is awakened by the caterpillar hitting her pointed tail against his chest, making him think about how dangerous that is. After all, that tail is still lethally poisonous. Because of this, he hopes the little one won't bite him while she sleeps, but assumes she won't be as restless anymore, since she already seems to have adapted quickly to her new home. Thinking about everything he has achieved, the mini-hero reflects that his life hasn't been bad at all. One day later, the pair gathers some piperus for the caterpillar to try, but Lacerda doesn't seem to like the smell very much and refuses to eat it, something her friend understands, since seasoning isn't meant to be eaten on its own anyway. In fact, the little one had caught the scent of something far more appealing, and when she finally found what had pleased her so much, it was simply a mushroom with a disturbing appearance and aroma. According to the divine voice, it was a Candida cadaverus, a B-rank mushroom that emits the stench of a corpse and contains a powerful poison. Disgusted as he watches his companion heading straight toward that disgusting thing to gorge herself on it, the young plague dragon can't stand it and burns the mushroom with his fire, which instantly enrages the caterpillar, who smacks him in the face several times in a row. In response, the dragon promises to make it up to his friend by giving her another poisonous plant. Suddenly, Lacerda prepares a mud shot, which makes the poor dragon think he's about to die because of a vulture-smelling mushroom. However, the caterpillar fires toward two animals that were lurking in a bush right behind them, forcing them out and revealing their frightening appearance. Or rather, it was only one animal, a dog-like creature with two heads, that makes the dragon feel a terrible chill down his spine when he checks its status. This creature, called Twin Heads, not only has broken attributes, but also possesses abilities with terrifying names like Gravity and Graviton. This makes the dragon think he has no chance of winning a fight. But the dog also has an ability called Sniff, which makes any attempt to escape much more difficult. In that case, the only possible path seems to be a direct confrontation. And after reaching an agreement with the Poison Princess, the winged lizard charges at the Twin Heads to create the perfect distraction so his partner can inject her venom into the enemy. Without a second thought, the dragon rushes in to throw a punch at one of the heads while Lacerda hides at the top of a tree. However, the other head protects the first with brute strength, while the protected one seems to lean toward another fighting style. Forming a magic circle near its mouth, the blue head generates a gravitational field above the opponent, pinning him to the ground. This creates serious problems for the dragon, who can't move and becomes an easy target. But as soon as he's attacked by Twin Heads, the Poison Princess fires mud at them, disabling the gravitational power that was restraining the protagonist. Now free, the winged monster retaliates with a devastating blast of fire. However, the blue head is able to regenerate the damage with magic, clearly noticing that the angry brown head deals physical damage and the sad blue head deals magical damage. The dragon sees the blue head preparing a magic circle larger than the previous ones, suggesting it's about to use that thing called Graviton, which he absolutely cannot allow to happen under any circumstances. With that in mind, the mini-hero runs as fast as he can toward the enemy to prevent the worst. His reckless approach causes him to get bitten by the brown head, but at the same time, he manages to land a punch on the blue head's face. At that moment being the perfect distraction, Lacerda strikes, biting into the blue head's neck. The venom spreads quickly while the blue head does everything it can to cure the condition. However, seeing its HP drop rapidly and death becoming certain, the brown head simply bites off its twin to prevent the toxin from reaching it. Witnessing this horror show, the young plague dragon promises never to evolve into anything that has two heads. Analyzing Twin Head's status, the winged lizard assumes the remaining dog will no longer be able to use magic till he suddenly notices that these things have an ability called Sacrifice. At that moment, the blue head, despite being severed, flies straight toward the Poison Princess and almost swallows her whole, if not for the caterpillar's great agility. Even so, the severed head continues chasing its prey in a terrifying manner, and when the dragon tries to help, he's stopped by the brown dog, which now stands before him to see which of the two will leave alive. Knowing he must finish this quickly to help his companion, the mini-hero charges into the fight and, after a brief exchange of blows, manages to dominate the struggle and use his nutcracker technique on the dog. destroying it decisively and even leveling the skill up to 2. Quickly, the dragon turns toward his friend and, while racing to find her with the speed of his roll, thinks about how the two met only a few days ago, yet have already been through so much together. In truth, the fact is that the poison Princess Lacerda is the only friend this dragon has in the world, and that's why he tells the divine voice he no longer needs to transform into a human as long as the caterpillar is safe. On the way, the monster notices a pool of blood and begins to panic when he can't find his companion anywhere. Then suddenly, Lacerda crawls out of a bush, extremely wounded. The blue head appears again, flying at a terrifying speed to attack the caterpillar once more. But the dragon intercepts it with a flurry of punches that turns what's left of the dog into pizza dough once and for all. Without thinking twice, the winged monster runs to check on his friend and expresses how happy he is to see that Lacerda is still alive. At the same time, the dragon receives 234 XP and gets irritated with the divine voice, since he doesn't care about leveling at that moment, but then he hears the system reveal that he has acquired the skill human transformation. And speaking of human, Myria Melania goes to Marielle to inform her that she has cleaned the entrance and the hallway. Since this village never receives visitors, Myria admits she's curious to know what these people are like, and Marielle assures her she'll find out soon. The young woman comments that the book in front of her friend looks quite old, and the elf explains that it's about monsters, believing the girl would like to read it. Marielle picked it up from the library. Truly interested, Myria opens it to a page where the shadow worm was drawn, but the description was written in a language she cannot read. According to Marielle, it's a very old text that describes the monster's rank, which, in this case, is F, meaning even Myria is capable of defeating it. On the other hand, things change when dealing with rank D creatures, which require proper adventurer training before you can defeat them. Going further, of course, monsters ranked B and above are extremely dangerous, so only heroes and saints are able to handle them. Meanwhile, the two dispatched adventurers get closer and closer to the village. Myria sees, in the book, the figure of a stone dragon, the monster that caused all the trouble she faces today. When asked, Marielle replies that this dragon is rank C, but she has heard that this type of creature can grow stronger as it evolves. There is no doubt it could easily kill any ordinary human, and that is why the elder always tells everyone not to wander through the forest. At that moment, the adventurers who were sent out open the door. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.